Good day and greetings from the Great White North. My name is Prickly Poo, and welcome to day 337 of a year of change and the beginning of week 49. This is it. This is our last 4-week period, our last month. It's not quite 30 days, but we're sort of in the last leg of our journey. The start of the last few legs of our journey, anyway, before the year is up. So we are going to still make a few changes over the next couple of weeks. But they're pretty much all related. And I talked about this earlier on during the week and stuff like that. But before we get going, as per usual, we need to do our weigh-in. Weigh yourself 3 times. Take the highest number like we have been. We've done this like 49 times, but still, just in case, we always need to make sure that we're taking the highest number. I actually had to weigh myself 4 times this morning when I did mine. Because there was a huge discrepancy between the first time and the second time. And then the third and fourth times were within 0.2 pounds of each other. So I'm like, good enough. Those are the ones I'm going to take. They were the highest number anyway. Still took the highest number. I always find it's easier to do that instead of going, well, technically it was this low number, because then, it's not consistent. And part of what we've been doing right from the get-go has been, it may not be perfectly accurate. It may not be 100%, but it's consistent. So even if whatever scale you're using is broken, as long as you're taking the highest number every time, at least that's still consistent. So I think it's a little more important at this point than finding out that you're exactly whatever 0.1 pounds, that you've lost or whatever. But it was interesting because this morning when I'm taking that highest number, I'm at the 89 pound mark as of today, and which means that I've got 4 weeks, and I'm 11 pounds away from that 100 pound mark, losing 100 pounds in a year. Which isn't where my original goal was, but we've adapted. Everything's fine. The problem with that is that it's really, really tempting to get to a point now where, it's doable because we're losing, anywhere between 1 and 2 pounds a week. And sometimes we lose more, sometimes we lose less, but it sort of averages out. But it's really tempting at this stage to go, okay, I'm going to, skip a meal on this day, and I'm going to cut way back here. I'm going to exercise twice over here. And as much as I want to hit that 100 pound mark, I don't want to do it by changing things now. I don't want to all of a sudden turn it, I'm going to do a month of an actual diet. I want to keep things the way that they are. And if it means I'm not going to hit that before the end of the year, then I'm not going to hit that before the end of the year. But where I'm feeling much better this week, I'm going to, my eating habits are going to stay the same, which is still good. I still lost this week, which I'm not quite sure how, because I wasn't really doing a lot of exercise. But, we've looked at that before. Exercise is a very small part of the weight loss. But where I have my schedule mapped out now, what I want to do, and at the end of this week, or at the end of last week, as should you, we now know, okay, these are the days I'm going to be exercising, so we can sort of, plan things accordingly. And where I'm getting back to where I was before, doing my old exercises, where I'm going to be walking for 10, and jogging for 10, and walking for 10, and jogging for 10, for that hour, then I'm hoping it's going to sort of get things back moving the way that they should be. And, I think I'm going to get really close. I don't think I'm going to make it, which bugs the hell out of me. But I'd rather, stay consistent than be able to celebrate and go, oh, well, I lost 100 pounds, but I haven't eaten in 3 days. So, which sort of brings me to what we're going to be doing this week. Over the next 2 or 3 weeks, or actually over the last 4 weeks, we're going to be finalizing everything else that we've done. Last week, we finished off by saying, okay, we now know what days we're going to be exercising. And I'd like to be able to say, well, we've chosen these 3 days to exercise, but it's going to be different for everybody. My days, generally, what I have mapped out right now are going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, I'm doing just a regular walk on my treadmill. I still want to do it every single day. Then my rest days are just sort of a, regular walk for me, which I did today. I started off today. Normally I take the weekends off, but today, nope. Did my 5 kilometers just as a regular walk. My regular pace is around 5 kilometers an hour, so I stay on it for about an hour. And by the end of it, this is where that moderate exercise comes in, where it's, I have a little bit of a gloss going on by the end of it. After about 20 minutes, and it just sort of stays that way. I don't get too overheated. I'm not huffing and puffing all over the place. The same sort of measurements that we've been using before. But on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and whatever days that you choose, it's entirely up to you. It's whatever your day or whatever your week is going to allow. Yours could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It could be, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It could be Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday. Whatever days that you have. It's sort of generally assumed that we've chosen 3 days a week that we're actually doing our activity. That those are the days that we've mapped out and said, good enough. These are, this is where I'm getting my however many minutes, usually 150-ish, of activity that we're looking at. And it's different for everybody. So just for the sake of ease, for while we're mapping all this stuff out, although it may not precisely apply to what you're doing, we're going to assume that it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing. Just because it's easier for me to remember. Because otherwise, it's just going to be, well, if you do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then you need to do this. And if you do it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, then you'll need to do that. So it's just generally assumed that, at the end of last week, you finalized everything and you have your 3 days. It might just be, you might be doing it 2 days at this point, but eventually it will be built up to those 3 days. At least you have it mapped out what you want to end up doing. So those 3 days a week that you're exercising, those are times when you specifically go and you're not just going, well, these are my busiest days anyway, so those are the days I'm going to count them as exercise. These are days where we are specifically exercising for the purpose of getting activity into our lives. So just so that it's much easier to sort of keep things organized, we're going to assume it's a Wednesday. There you go, Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing. So what we're going to be doing this week, we aren't all of a sudden just going to say, all right, now we're upping everything. And now you have to go at a dead run the entire way. When I do mine, my moderate exercise has always been around 5 kilometers an hour. And which is like 2.5, 3 miles an hour, which is much easier just because it's something that I walk at a normal pace. But because I'm walking for an extended period of time, that's where I get my exercise. And those are sort of my rest days at this point. Because my regular pace, and this is what I'm trying to get back to this week as well, now that I'm feeling better, I'm not sick anymore, is I usually walk for 10, jog for 10, walk for 10, jog for 10, walk for 10, jog for 10. That makes up my hour. And eventually I want to start building that up so that I'm, walking for 9, jogging for 11, walking for 9, jogging for 11, the same way that I was going before, but it hasn't really adapted in the past few weeks. I have been able to do the 10 minutes straight of jogging, which has been awesome. Would never have been able to do that a year ago. But I found that on Thursdays and Fridays, I got to a point where I couldn't finish it off. So that's why we adapt and breaking it up and having 2, what I'm going to call rest days in between, where I just do a regular walk for that hour. And I'm hoping that's going to fix it. If not, then I will adapt again. But for right now, that's what we're doing. But those 10 minutes of me jogging, that's what we're going to be looking at today. And we touched on this a long time ago when we were doing exercise, but it's always good to do a recap. So the change for this week is out of your 3 days, and it doesn't matter which day it is. Ideally, I would imagine it's going to be easiest to, it'd be easiest to do it the last day, but it's probably easiest to do it the first day. Get it out of the way early in the week. Maybe you're like a midday person. Anyway, whenever you decide to do it, because it's going to be different for everyone. There are some times that I think, well, I'll do the hard stuff in the beginning of the week, and then I can take the rest of the week off. Or now I'm going to save it up and do all the hard stuff at the end of the week because I don't want to do it. Or sometimes it's just you have plans to do it in the middle of the week, and it doesn't happen, and then you have to do it at the end of the week. So whatever day that you have that you find that you can sort of fit it in. That's what the changes that we're going to be making this week. I probably should go into a little more detail because that didn't make any sense. Anyway. What we're going to be doing is 1 day a week, whichever day that you've decided on, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever you have 3 days that you're exercising. Take one of those days and do something to your exercise routine that turns it into vigorous exercise. That's the only change. You don't have to do all 3 days. You don't have to do the entire session. I don't do an entire session when I do mine. Mine right now is around 50% vigorous exercise. But during the other half of it, because it's 10 on, 10 off, 10 on, 10 off, that sort of thing, is that moderate. So you don't want to do, I'm going to cut my time in half and do vigorous and then nothing else. Whatever you're doing for your regular exercise, take a portion of it and start building so that at least one day you're doing vigorous exercise for a portion of it. And it should be a substantial portion, at least a third of it. Not just going, I can do 10 minutes out of an hour as vigorous exercise. We should be accustomed to that moderate exercise at this point. We've gotten used to measuring, how fast we can go or how much weight we can lift or how long we can swim or whatever it is that you decided to do, judging on our breathing and, how much sweat we have. But you will notice when you start doing the vigorous exercise, that's going to increase just slightly. And the way to measure it, I mean, you can check your pulse, you can check, like all sorts of different things, your temperature, your breathing rate, your heart rate, all the other stuff. But for me, I found the best way to do it is to keep things very practical and keep things familiar. The same way that we measured moderate exercise is how I measure vigorous exercise. Now, with moderate exercise, it was very simple. It was, you get a bit of a sweat going on after about 20 minutes of it, and you sort of maintain that throughout the rest of it. You can still carry on a conversation, but you can't sing. So, because, your breathing gets deeper, your breathing gets faster. With vigorous exercise, that's going to go right out the window. The sweating thing, to begin with, after about 5 or 10 minutes of it, you are going to be sweating. Not a nice little glaze going on, but out and out sweating, which is nothing new. I mean, we're kind of used to sweating all the time anyway. But this is, a proper sweat where it will be dripping off your face. And when it comes to the breathing, you're not going to be able to have a conversation with anybody, let alone sing. Singing is gone. But with vigorous exercise, you have a really hard time, speaking more than a few words without having to stop and refocus on your breathing. Because when you're doing this, a lot of your energy is going in to concentrate on getting as much air in as you can. And when you start talking, it's very controlled. There's a lot of exhalation. You don't really take the time to take a deep breath every once in a while when you're having a conversation with someone. Except for and then you keep talking that way. So usually you're only going to get a few words out before you're going to be huffing and puffing, and you're just going to make things worse for yourself. So when you're doing vigorous exercise, and it is going to take a few days to sort of figure out, okay, well, this is what would be vigorous exercise for me. So when you are doing that, that's a good gauge. Now, as always, if you find that you start in on something and you go, okay, well, I can't breathe at all now. I'm having a really hard time. I'm getting lightheaded. Things are starting to hurt. Then obviously you're doing too much, so you need to dial it back a bit. If you start out with your moderate exercise and you up it up, if you up it a little bit, and you can still, sort of have a conversation with someone, even if you're out of breath, then, although it's still better, you're sort of on the cusp there. So it's going to take a little bit of time to get used to it, to try to figure out, okay, well, where's my pace? Now for me, it's 9 kilometers an hour, which is around 4.5, 5 miles an hour. What I find with that is my stride is enough that if it was at 8.5, I have to slow my pace down just a little bit. Otherwise, I tend to sort of start creeping up the treadmill. And at 9.5, I'm really struggling to keep up. So 9 is a really good sort of baseline for me for when I do my jogging. And at that point, I can still, I was able to do it. I should be able to get back into it as well. I can still do 10 minutes at a time. And by the end of the hour, I'm just soaked all the way through. It's disgusting. But at that stage, I know I've done something. Now, the vigorous exercise is going to be something that can be really daunting. It can be scary for a lot of us because we simply aren't used to it. It's taken a lot for us to get to a point where we're actually even introducing activity. And then we sort of up that to moderate exercise. And that's what we've been working on for the past few weeks. So upping it again, the reason why we're just sort of doing this one day out of the 3 is that we can't just all of a sudden say, all right, now you're doing vigorous exercise. Because inevitably, we're going to do too much too soon because we don't know what we're doing. It's going to take time to try to adapt to that. And that's why when you have that day, say that you pick your first day. Say, I'm going to get it out of the way early, going to do it at the beginning of the week. So Monday is my day when I do my vigorous exercise. The first time that you do it, it's not going to be a success. You're not going to know what you're doing. You're going to either do too much, you're going to do way too little. It's going to take some time to get used to it. So once we start out with that first day, you're going to be fumbling all over the place. Don't worry. If you want to try it again on your second day or your third day or whatever, then by all means go for it. But the main thing that we need to do is to at least introduce it into our exercise routine. Because by the end of this year, we want to be doing vigorous exercise for our exercise. So that when we think of it and we say, okay, well, this is my exercise day, we know what we're up against. We know that it's not just going to be, well, it's a leisurely walk or, I'm going to take my time. I can still talk with my friends and do this and this and this when I'm exercising. We want to have some exercise that's going to make a difference, something that we're going to be able to feel. And with the vigorous exercise, you're going to be able to feel it. But again, it's going to be different for everyone. Your pace, there are some people that I've seen on MyFitnessPal that are running, 13, 14, 15 kilometers an hour. There's no way in hell that I am ready for that. I wouldn't even be able to do it. Let alone, like, my pace is, like, my leg length is not there. So that's part of it. I would just be at a dead run all the time trying to keep up with that. So I know that that's not for me. So whatever it is that you're doing for your exercise, whether it's swimming or hockey or basketball or walking or whatever, weightlifting, it's going to take some time to get used to it, especially during that first day. But it's going to give you a good idea. And if you find that when you're done with it, you think, okay, you know what, that wasn't quite enough, I can probably do a little bit more, then do a little bit more. Just be careful. Don't do something that obviously is going to get you hurt. We've run through this too many times, but it's always good to do it again. If you go into something and you're starting with your exercise and you start feeling pain or you ache the next day or anything like that, obviously it's too much. We aren't doing this so that we are working out for that hour. It's mainly getting to a point where the exercise isn't just activity for us anymore. It's exercise with a purpose. And the vigorous exercise will do that. And that's what we're going to be changing over the next 3 or 4 weeks before the end of the year, is getting to a point that that's what our exercise is. And for me, although I still don't have a full hour of vigorous exercise, and I won't be able to probably do a full hour even by the end of the year, I will have a really good basis for constantly building on it. I started out by doing just 60 minutes of walking, and then when I very first started, I was doing 19 minutes of walking and then tried doing 1 minute of jogging. And even then, it wasn't at 9 kilometers an hour. It was just, I quickened my pace for that minute. And it's gradually over the weeks, it's been building and building and building to a point where now it's pretty much 50-50. So I know that I can keep going, and eventually I will get to a point where I'll be walking for 5 and then jogging for 15. And then at that stage, I know I can do 15 in a row. And then it's just a matter of constantly building up so that I can actually do a full hour. That's my main goal, is to be able to do a full hour at a jog. Then I can start building up, like the time and the distance and all the other stuff. Once you get to a point where you know that you can do something, it's just a matter of adding, even if it was adding 30 seconds at a time. And I think that's what I was doing, is when I started adding stuff, I don't even think I was adding 1 minute each time. I was just adding 30 seconds. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure that's what I did. So tiny increments is all that you need to do. But the main thing is we need to get it introduced into what we're doing now. And that's what the vigorous exercise will do. So by the end of it, trust me, you will be sweating profusely. So do it before you shower. I will give you that little bit of advice. No matter when you're doing it, you're going to need to take a shower afterwards, because you're just, it's kind of gross. But the weird thing is that you do feel better afterwards, and not like an endorphin thing. Like everyone goes, "Oh, you get that runner's high." It's not that. It's just that you get that feeling of accomplishment. The same feeling that you get when someone says, "Oh, would you like a piece of cake?" And you're like, "I would, but I'm not going to. I'm doing really well this week. Things are good, but thanks." You could still have it, but just that feeling that you get, that feeling of, I did something that made a difference to, my weight loss and everything else, that's the sort of feeling that you get after it. You aren't going to get the runner's high. If you do, bravo, but I highly doubt it. I've been doing this for quite a few weeks. I've yet to experience it. And I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to push myself to the point where I actually do get it, because I think at that point your body just goes, okay, you know what, you're dead, but I'm going to dump in a whole bunch of endorphins to make you feel better, because, smoke them if you got them. But for when you're doing this, when you're doing this, when it's done, and especially once you get it as part of your regular schedule and you start adding in, okay, well, now I can do 2 days. Now I can do 3 days. Now it's, half of my time is vigorous exercise. When you start hitting those little milestones and you get that feeling that, you'll be able to look back and say, a year ago, for me, a year ago, walking up, not even the hill at work, which we've gone through many, many times, but the little slope by my house, which is maybe a dozen steps. It's a very light slope going up, a flight of stairs. Like if I had to go up to the second floor for something, it's 15, maybe 20 steps. I would be just exhausted, completely out of breath, wouldn't be able to speak, would need to actually compose myself before I left the stairwell so I wouldn't embarrass myself. being able to look back on that and then compare it to how I am now, that I can jog for 10 minutes straight, and yes, I'm out of breath, but I can recover faster from that than I could walking up that little slope near my house a year ago. And it just, I mean, I've gotten out of breath getting out of bed. So you'll be able to look back and you have that sense of accomplishment. You have that feeling that, you know what, I have improved. And we may not be marathon runners, we might not be weightlifters, we may never be at a point where we go, you know what, I'm going to be in a competition. But we are better than where we were a year ago. And even though we're just doing the moderate exercise up until now, then, I mean, think back to where you were a year ago when it comes to exercise. Any kind of activity at all, not even really just exercise. But to be able to say, you know, I can't imagine a year from now I'm going to have 3 days scheduled out of the week where I actually do something just for activity's sake. So we have improved, and it will keep going, and that's the good feeling that you get from it. So for this week, all that we're going to do, pick one of your days, and take that day, and that's going to be the day where you do vigorous exercise. It doesn't have to be for the full hour. I'm still not even up to the full hour yet, but it's a good starting point. It's a good time to introduce that into what we're trying to do. So after 5 or 10 minutes of the exercise, you should be sweating pretty well. It's really kind of gooey and gross and drippy all over the place, so it's not just that little glaze. It's pretty much the same way that you would if you were in the shower and you just turn the shower off. It's almost that bad. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I just sweat an awful lot. But your body does that so that everything will stay nice and cool. So you should be fairly sweaty by the time everything is all done. You will be out of breath. I will admit that. It's going to be tough. Just don't get to a point where you're huffing and puffing and you can't catch your breath. You can still, I mean, you're spending the majority of your focus is going to be spent on maintaining your breathing. That's why you aren't going to be able to carry on a conversation with someone. You can say 2 or 3 words at a time maybe, but you're not going to be able to actually talk with anyone while you're doing this because you're concentrating so hard on keeping those big, long, deep breaths going. Your breath will quicken a little bit as well, but I mean, again, it's going to be different for everyone. Your pace might be twice as slow as someone else's. It might be twice as fast as someone else's. It's different for everybody. And if we keep that gauge going, then you'll find that you'll know when you need to improve. You'll know when you can extend the time or when you can increase, the incline if you're walking, or if you can do an extra lap if you're in the pool, or if you can add another 5 pounds onto the weights. You're going to know when you're going to be able to improve, because you're going to start getting used to what you're doing, and then that's when we need to up it up. Up it up a little. I keep saying up it up. I need to up it a little bit more. I don't know where up it up comes from, but there you go. That's the title of this. Up it up. There we go. Oh, you have a hard time trying to figure out what I'm going to use for a title for a video, but up it up is sounding pretty good, and by now you've already seen the title, so this is kind of stupid for me to say that I'm announcing it now. Anyway, that's what the title is going to be. So that's the only change that we're going to be doing this week. And you only need to do it one day out of your 3 that you've chosen. It doesn't matter which day it is. It's really just to introduce that into it. By the end of the week, you're going to have a much better idea. You're going to have things sort of figured out and going, okay, it was only one day, but I know that I can up this a little bit here. I can try this here. And if you want to add those in for, day 2 and day 3, just so that you can get a better gauge as to where that vigorous exercise is going, then by all means do it. But at the very least, we need to take one day where we actually get a good sweat going. So, and then next week, we'll start adding in more stuff, and we're just going to keep adapting so that by the end of this year, the end of this month, which is also the end of the year, which is so weird, by the end of this, then you're going to be able to look at it and say, okay, I do vigorous exercise 3 days a week. I know what I need to do, and when I start getting used to it, I know what I'm going to need to do to sort of upgrade, to up it up once more. That sounds so stupid. But now it's going to catch it on. Anyway, that's all it is for this week. As per usual, keep on doing what you're doing. We are doing better. I'm going to try really hard not to just do like extra stuff to try to sneak under that 100-pound mark. It would be very nice if I do. And it is doable, but that's still, it's 11 pounds in 4 weeks, which I should be able to do. But again, I don't want to push it. I want to stay doing what I'm doing. I'd rather stay steady and keep that consistency going instead of trying to change things up at the very end and cut my food intake and up my exercise and try to do an extreme diet for the last 4 weeks, because it would kind of diminish what we've been trying to do for the past 11 months. But for right now, I'm going to leave this video here. So thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, please poke the like button for me. And in the meantime, keep yourself warm and fuzzy, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.